As artists start out using Photoshop, blending modes can seem abstract and uninviting. You may not even know what I'm talking about when I say the phrase blending mode. These modes, however, are the building blocks required to add color to your painting. So what is a blending mode? Well, it's an attribute that all layers have, which describes the way that they visually mix with the layers below them in the stack. So if you take a look at these two blue squares, they look like they're both on opaque paper. But I'll take the one on the right and I'll change its blending mode to multiply. And you can immediately see the difference. While the normal mode on the left looks opaque, its clone on the right, the multiply mode, is exactly the same in every way other than its blending mode, and yet it looks like it's on a toned piece of plastic, almost like a gel you'd put over a light on the stage. The software gives you a large selection of these modes, but my process only requires 4: normal, multiply, color, and color dodge. So I'm going to go through each of these one by one and show you their properties. The first is normal, and this is the default style. It treats your paint as if it's opaque, and it doesn't do any blending with the layers below. This is probably what you're used to if you've done any painting already. So if I sample this blue here and paint with the hard round brush, it fully covers whatever's below it. And if you see anything below, it's because I'm not using full opacity with my strokes. You'd use this sort of layer if you were doing opaque painting that you wanted the gouache look, or maybe thick acrylics, or potentially thick oils. So for now on, I'll be referring to these as opaque layers, and probably won't use the term normal. The second most common blending mode is called multiply, and this is used for glazing. So if you watch here, I'll sample the same blue as before and paint it on a multiply layer. Now I'm getting quite a different look here. This looks a lot more like watercolors, or potentially acrylics, or even thin oils. So to create this glazing effect, these will have a naturally darkening effect on the value of the color. This is because it's mixing with the layers below. So you might notice that the color that I picked, the light blue, ended up looking a little darker when I painted it on the multiply layer. For now on, I'll be referring to these as glaze layers and not multiply layers. This next type is called a color layer. Now, even though this is a familiar sounding term, it has nothing to do with what you've done in real life. It's a uniquely digital concept. So in this case, I'll sample the same color again and paint over top. You see how it disappears a bit in those high value areas and the highlights? Well, what it's doing is it's only overwriting the hue and the saturation of the lower layers. It adopts their value. So what that means is it keeps the underlying value structure of this underpainting completely intact, and all it's doing is colorizing. And finally, color dodge. Now this, again, is not similar to any real-world phenomenon, but it's useful for creating a radiant effect. So color dodge layers, when I sample the same color here, you can see really increase the values. They almost work in the opposite manner of a multiply. Where a multiply layer will darken the values, color dodge layers increase both the value and saturation, creating sort of a glowing effect. Now I don't use these very often because they can lead to blown out highlights and oversaturation. But when used sparingly, they can really create a pleasing glow in your work. So take a minute and look over these 4 blending modes once again: opaque, glaze, color, and color dodge, because these are going to be the 4 blending modes that I use for the remainder of this series.